Where is God in The Lord of the Rings? In an enchanted world filled with supernatural wizards, wicked demons, malevolent spirits, terrifying wraiths, mysterious elves, cantankerous dwarves, mighty yet loathsome goblins, and the most magnificent dragons, it is surprising that the divine seems absent, and religion appears to be non-existent, though sharp-eyed readers may spot the name of a ceremony here or there. Given it is through religion that we encounter the mythological and the divine, one would expect it in Middle-earth. What makes the apparent absence of God more intriguing is that the author of the series, J.R.R. Tolkien, believed that The Lord of the Rings was a fundamentally Catholic work, and, in his own words, the religious element is absorbed into the story and the symbolism. Certainly, it has been pointed out by many that three of the main characters are types of Christ. Gandalf, the prophet who dies in battle with the Balrog, a demon of the ancient world, giving his life to save his friends, and then is resurrected in new power. Aragorn, who having passed through the realm of the dead and overthrowing evil, establishes a new reign of peace and prosperity. And Frodo, the high priest who carries with him evil on behalf of the world, sacrificing his own well-being for the good of all. Yet none of these, within the world of Middle-earth, are treated as God or are the objects of worship. While they manifest in themselves characteristics of the Christian God, they do not show us where the creator of Middle-earth is hiding. By contrast, in the Chronicles of Narnia, penned by Tolkien's close friend C.S. Lewis, the place of God is clearly seen in the character of Aslan, and in George R.R. Martin's Game of Thrones there are many religions. However, all is not that it seems. The God of Middle-earth is in fact intimately present throughout the story of The Lord of the Rings. In fact, the divine can be found in every passage, paragraph, sentence and word, with the thoughts, feelings and actions of every character, in the climactic battles, quiet moments of reflection, and the fellowship of friends singing ancient songs and laughing together. In other words, while it may appear that there is no God in The Lord of the Rings, in reality, God is everywhere within this fantasy epic. To explain how this is so, it will be necessary to engage with the mythology of Middle-earth contained within the Ainu Lindale, which means the music of the Ainur, an elvish song going back to the very beginnings of their written language. It tells the story of Middle-earth's creation. In the beginning was Eru, the One, also known as Ilúvatar, which means Father of all. He first made the Ainur, the Holy Ones, who were the offspring of his thought forged by the flame imperishable, also called the secret fire, Eru's creative spirit. Each of the Ainur came from a different part of Ilúvatar's mind, reflecting a different aspect of his thought and character. He spoke to them and shared with them themes of music he had devised, but at first they could only comprehend that part of the music which corresponded to their origin in Ilúvatar's mind. Then Ilúvatar called all the Ainur together and declared them to one theme, a great music. Amazed by what they apprehended, the Ainur bowed before Ilúvatar, and then at his command sang together in harmony, each adorning the theme with their own thoughts and deeds, so that Ilúvatar could enjoy the beauty he had awakened into song through the Ainur. Interchanging melodies woven in harmony overflowed the dwelling of Eru and into the void, and it was beautiful, it was glorious, and it was stunning. Yet, as the theme developed, there was one among the Ainur who introduced discord. Melkor, greatest of the Ainur, who had received a share in all the gifts of the others, desired the creative spirit of the flame imperishable for himself, and sought to glorify himself through his music. His thoughts seeped into the music, so that many who sang with him grew despondent, while others joined his alternative theme against Ilúvatar's. These would have included somebody like Sauron, or the Balrogs in their initial form. It spread and resounded, becoming like a raging storm amidst which Eru sat. Yet the one rose and smiled, lifting up his left hand, and a new theme began amid Melkor's cacophony. Like but unlike the first theme, gathering in power and beauty. Melkor's discord rose up against it, and conflict ensued between the two musical themes, his music more violent than before. The Ainur, shaken by this experience, sang no more, and Melkor, who was later known as Morgoth, was dominant. Then Ilúvatar rose again, his countenance stern, and lifting his right hand, a new theme grew, unlike the others. It was soft and sweet, gentle sounds rippling together, but it was deep and unquenchable. It was utterly at variance with Melkor's clamorous, loud and vain, repetitive noises. His music attempted to drown out the wide and beautiful song of sorrow, but in actuality, its most triumphant notes were taken up into Ilúvatar's third theme. In time, Eru rose again, and this time with a face terrible to behold. Raising both hands in a final chord, the music ceased, and there was silence. Ilúvatar addressed the Ainur, praising their might, including that of Melkor's. But to show them that he was Ilúvatar, the father of all, he decided to show them a vision of what they had sung. Thus he declared, "Behold your music," and before their eyes was a sight of a new world made visible, and the world's history unfolded before their eyes in accord with the music they had sung. This was the story of Middle-earth that they had sung of. Many desired to enter this world and tend it as an end in itself, though Melkor, despite feigning good intention even to himself, in reality only wanted to enter to have domination. Knowing their wishes, Eru called the Ainur together and created Ea, the world, saying, "Let things be." And so, sending forth the flame imperishable into the void, the world that is came into being. Many Ainur chose to abide in the world, accepting Eru's condition that their power be confined to that place. These are known as the Valar, the powers of the world, and the Maya, lesser deities among the Ainur. To their shock, the world they entered was barren and unshapen and dark, and so they realized what they had previously sung, they now had to make be in the real world through their actions. And so, the history of Middle-earth is the coming to be of the great music of the Ainur, before the creation of the world. The mythos presented here is deeply monotheistic, despite appearances to the contrary. There is one sole creator, Ilúvatar, who alone has the power to create life. Those he creates are instruments of his will. While the world may appear like a battle between good and evil, the songs of Ilúvatar versus those of Melkor, in reality they are all under the design of Eru. The one explicitly informs Melkor of this, telling the mightiest of the Ainur that he would see that no theme may be played that hath not its uttermost source in me, nor can any alter music in my despite. For he that attempteth this shall prove my instrument in the devising of things more wonderful, which he himself hath not imagined. And again Eru spoke to Melkor. Thou, Melkor, wilt discover all the secret thoughts of thy mind, and wilt perceive that they are but a part of the whole and tributary to its glory. This idea, that even evil has its origin in Eru, was reflected in the third theme of Ilúvatar. Though Melkor's music appeared to conflict with the design of Eru, in actuality it was, like all the music, the product of Ilúvatar's thought, and in service beyond itself, just as the world sung of by the Ainur was not only for its own sake, but according to Ilúvatar's design for the habitation of the children of Ilúvatar, elves and humanity. This corresponds to the very origin of the Ainur. They are the manifestations of Eru's thought as independent beings, creatures created with particular skills and personalities corresponding to the mind of Ilúvatar, who by their own free will engage with the world in a certain way. Yet in so doing, are the instruments by which Iluvatar's thoughts or design comes into being. It creates the story he had designed. There are no competing powers. There is no dualism here. Eru is the sole creator and sovereign of history, the origin and director of all that happens, even opposition to himself. And this is in service to his story. As the Bible puts it in Isaiah 45:7, God declares that I form the light and create the darkness. I make peace and create evil. I, the Lord, do all these things. That the thoughts, feelings, and actions of free agents manifest the will of the one, what we would call God, is an idea deeply ingrained in classical theism. Traditionally understood, God is omnipotent, that is, all-powerful, without limit on his ability to act. Frequently, many of us are guilty of imagining God's power as if it were like if we had unlimited power. For creatures like ourselves, power is always competitive. When we act, we do so in such a way which limits the powers of another. For example, if I pick up an apple, it follows you cannot pick up the apple, and vice versa. Often our powers come into conflict, and those who are stronger win out. When we conceive of omnipotence, we imagine it would be like having the most power of anyone, dominating reality so that nobody could stop us from doing what we wanted to. This is personified in the person of Melkor. His music, and later what he did to Middle-earth and through his lieutenants like Sauron, was an attempt to drown out all variation, all competition with his will. It is also underlying the idea that when God acts, it constitutes a violation of the law of nature, an intervention in an otherwise self-governed world. It's competitive, God's action versus nature. This, however, is not like the power of God. God's agency is, by and large, non-competitive. The divine acts without reducing the agency of others. Instead, God usually acts in such a way that supports the free actions of others. For example, the regularity we perceive in the world is a consequence of God's decision to sustain a particular pattern of cause and effect in the world, which he can change at any moment, hence the possibility of miracles. They are not so much a violation of the laws of nature as a change in how God is supporting the universe. History is God's will manifested through the free actions of agents. Even if a deed is motivated by rebellion against God, it is still part of God's plan for creation, still a product of divine action. Hence the saying in the Bible, you worked it for evil, but God worked it for good. Such agency, which works through the free and independent lives of others, is possible because God is categorically distinct from creation. As the creator, God is nothing like what he has made. We often think of God as an old man in the sky, a jumped-up human being with extreme power, something like Zeus. Such a view of God makes him one object among many within the world, another creature, who is in competition with other creatures. No better than a supernatural flying spaghetti monster. But God is not like that. He is totally unique and other. He is categorically distinct. He does not belong in the same realm as we do. Thomas Aquinas put the point most starkly, saying that God is not just a being, but being itself. While in comparison to God, creation is non-being. It does not exist. And many of the attributes of God are supposed to convey this sort of categorical distinction. So God is eternal. He is outside of time. This is supposed to highlight that God is not like us who are in time and subject to change, so on and so forth. This is what Iluvatar is like compared to his creation, totally distinct, and as a consequence the story of creation is of his action. Put another way, Eru is such that the entire history of Middle-earth, down to the tiniest detail, is the implementation of Iluvatar's design through free and independently existing creatures. At every stage, they put into being what he intended from before the beginning of the world. Consider, then, that Iluvatar does not appear in The Lord of the Rings as one among many characters, but as the author of the story. Though it records the journeys of many characters who act according to their free volition, his hand presides over every single event, from the large-scale battle to the minutest inscription on the ring of power. It is his story, but that is exactly why he does not appear in it directly. This is perhaps best illustrated in the climax of the plot, the destruction of Sauron's ring. Having reached the innards of Mount Doom, Frodo is ready to cast the foul objects into the depths below. Yet, in that moment his will was overpowered by temptation, and he took the ring to be his own. He set it on his finger, and all seemed lost. Then Gollum, the wretch who was ensnared by lust for the ring, fought Frodo, and bit the ring clean off Frodo's hand. Again, things seemed even worse. Gollum celebrated his victory, dancing like a mad thing, screaming in wild delight, "Precious! Precious! Precious!" And at that moment, as he gazed upon his beloved, he stepped too far, toppled, wavered just for a moment on the brink, and then fell with a shriek. He and the ring were destroyed. There is no direct appearance of Eru in this passage, and it can be read as a simple interaction of the characters. Though Frodo failed, the consuming power of the ring and a curse it had laid upon Gollum saw to its own destruction. However, in a letter written by Tolkien, he explained that this was not exactly the case. In his words, Frodo deserved all honour because he spent every drop of his power of will and body, and that was just sufficient to bring him to the destined point, and no further. Few others, possibly no others of his time, would have got so far. The other power then took over, the writer of the story, by which I do not mean myself, that one ever-present person who is never absent and never named, as one critic has said. In this passage, we see what Tolkien is saying about an author of the story, which we can infer is Ilúvatar, who is responsible for the destruction of the ring. Frodo got as far as he could, but ultimately, like all people, was overcome by evil. However, at that moment Eru gave grace to the world, and caused Gollum to fall to his doom. Note, Gollum was not forced to his death. No character intervened or threw Gollum off the edge of a cliff by brute strength. Rather, through Gollum's and the ring's own agency, Eru worked the story he wanted to tell, one of eucatastrophe, which, if you want to find out more about, you can see a previous video that I made, which I'll put in the link below. In essence, through Gollum and the ring's evil, Ilúvatar was able to work his own purposes, and triumph was made complete. All was as Ilúvatar had intended, and it was all through his action, through the agents in the story's actions, that this was made manifest. Consequently, God is ever present in the Lord of the Rings. It is his story, and everything that happens does so according to his will, which because of his nature becomes realized through his creation of free agents who enact his thought into reality. So to answer the question at the heart of this video, God is where the story is, as its author, his presence felt in every aspect of its being. I will leave you with a redacted conversation between Frodo and Gandalf in the Fellowship of the Ring, which is one of the few times where Eru's guiding hand in this remarkable tale is brought to light. Gandalf has just informed Frodo as to the identity and history of the ring, and how it was remarkable that it came into Bilbo's possession. There was more than one power at work, Frodo. The ring was trying to get back to its master. It had slipped from Ilúvatar's hand and betrayed him. Then, when a chance came, it caught poor Deagle, and he was murdered, and after that Gollum, and it had devoured him. It could make no further use of him. He was too small and mean, and as long as it stayed with him, he would never leave his deep pool again. So now, when its master was awake once more and sending out his dark thought from Mirkwood, it abandoned Gollum, only to be picked up by the most unlikely person imaginable, Bilbo from the Shire. Behind that, there was something else at work, beyond any design of the Ringmaker. I can put it no plainer than saying that Bilbo was meant to find the ring, and not by its maker. In which case you also were meant to have it, and that may be an encouraging